Welcome to Bench Boost Boys with me, Gav, and my wonderful co-host Scott. It's Gameweek 8 forecast. Ward-Prowse's dead balls. How's it going, Scott?
It's going really well, Gav. How are you?
Not too bad, mate. Always a nice week when you can hit above the average points. Something we'll obviously talk in a lot of detail this week. Just as a bit of admin to remind everybody, you can catch Bench Boost Boys on our website, benchboostboys.club. We're on all the usual social media sites, all with the name Bench Boost Boys. Please hit us up. You can send us questions for our mailbag, which we'll get to. We've got 3 tasty questions that we're going to talk about towards the end of the show. But first of all, quick rundown. What are we talking about and in what order, Scott?
Yeah, so we're just going to break down the previous game week first, and we'll take a break after that to talk about our own performances, as well as kind of player news and speculation, a few injuries and things like that. Another quick break, and for those that are just coming to obviously hear about what we're talking about with respect to next week and what we're going to be doing with our own teams and maybe the questions from the mailbag, that'll happen after our second break.
Yeah, so to be entirely frank, if all you really care about is our wonderful expert opinions, of course they're expert, about what to do next week, who to transfer in, who to hang on to, jump right forward towards the end of the podcast. Don't blame you at all. But should we get straight into it?
Let's do it. Let's talk about the previous week's fixtures. Wolves versus Crystal Palace is where we kicked off.
Yeah, tasty way to start the week. I think a lot of people were wondering if Wilfried Zaha would continue his fine form. Did he, Scott?
He didn't.
He did not.
But Zaha's one of those players that always has the off week, the on week, the off week, the on week. There's a few players like that, but Zaha's one of them. I think for a lot of FPL managers, when you have your first game week starts well, and for a lot of us it did. For Wolves fans, the game finished 2-0. So with that game, you know, a lot of FPL managers have Wolves defenders on their teams. I did myself. So to have, you know, a lot of clean sheet points across the board is really important. One defender that didn't play though was Seiss.
Yeah, now there was a bit of a thought, wasn't there, before this game week? There was quite a contrasting thought that Seiss at that stage was the highest scoring defender, I think, in FPL. And then there were rumours, I think based on substitutions the week before, would Seiss play?
Yeah, and I took the gamble that he would, but I knew that if he didn't, I had Kilman on the bench anyway, so I didn't really get bitten. Those that did keep the faith in Seiss, it's hard to say whether or not he's going to be coming back into the team anytime soon. I don't think he's a player you can leave out for very long because Marcel's still injured. You know, he's a player that actually delivered a lot of points, so he must have a fairly good influence on that team as a whole, and surely, you know, Nuno knows that. So it'd be crazy for him to stay out. So I'm going to keep the faith for another week in that player. But another player that we saw get a lot of points in the game week, 15 in total, was Ait Nouri, a fairly new signing. Got the clean sheet, the bonus points, and the goal. So a perfect start, essentially, for that player. He's owned by bugger all FPL managers, but he might have put himself on a few people's watch lists.
Yeah, tasty 15 points for him. And I tell you, it's always a luxury, particularly this season so far, to see clean sheets.
Yeah, and we'll skip ahead to another game that involved another clean sheet, was Man City, Sheffield United. The clean sheet, bonus points, and goal, all again for one more player, and that's Kyle Walker, owned by a few FPL managers, though. This guy's owned by about 2.5% of FPL managers. I reckon he'll find himself a few more owners after that performance.
Absolutely. De Bruyne, looking through that lens of a luxury elite player, yes, he got an assist and he got 6 points, but I don't know, when you kind of look at the likes of Salah and so on and Kane, it's just not happening for him this season so far.
No, and we've talked a little bit in the past about the fact that he hasn't got anyone to put balls into apart from Raheem Sterling. Aguero's out again, and Jesus is obviously, he's still out. So keep an eye on De Bruyne. It was, for all intents and purposes, a good game week, but again, when you're talking about that kind of premium price point, someone like Salah, same kind of costs, got an extra couple of points, so you're paying for the extra.
On the Man City point as well, Foden didn't start the game. He's someone that a couple of weeks back I kind of fancied as putting in my team. Not so confident.
Yeah, he's one of the players that sits on the fringe as a kind of a rotational player. Another team that has a lot of players sitting on the fringe and they're rotating through is Chelsea. They played Burnley away won 3-0. Really good result for Chelsea.
Another clean sheet. Back in the trend with this game week.
Yeah. There hasn't been a lot of clean sheets, so a lot of the highest scoring players in the game week were defenders. Again, Kurt Zouma, we talked about him last week. I was tossing up between Zuma and Chilwell, and of course I picked Chilwell because, but he actually had he got some points anyway. But Kurt Zuma was on the score sheet, as was Ziyech, who also got an assist.
Hasn't he hit the ground running?
Yeah, really, really good player, and someone to certainly add to the watch list if you have the money for him.
And someone else quietly going about their business. Another goal from Timo Werner.
Timo Werner. So a lot of players didn't get much out of Timo Werner after the first game week. The first game week he got a few points. Then there was a lot of blanks for Timo Werner, but the people that held their patience and held on to Timo Werner are getting rewarded for that.
Yeah, well done for you. And obviously, shout out to Mendy, who's clearly smashing it since arriving at Chelsea. So maybe a good goalkeeper choice if you want someone to put a bit of money on. Jorginho, though, a lot of managers liked him at his price point. He was a penalty taker. There were murmurs during the week from Lampard that he might not take penalties now, because had he missed 2? Yeah,
he's missed 2, once in the Premier League, once in Europe.
And then, of course, at that price point as well, you don't blame people for doing it, but he played 4 minutes, I think, at the weekend. So that's probably going to be disappointing for some managers.
Yeah. Back to the games. Liverpool played West Ham, and this was another. We've talked a little bit about Liverpool's shaky defence. Of course, Liverpool won the game. They are a better team than West Ham, but they don't seem to have that strong defence anymore. Obviously, Van Dijk's injury, Fabinho's injury.
They've lost their talisman a bit, haven't they, in Van Dijk?
Yeah, and a lot of FPL managers are asking, is it still worth holding on to Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold? We've been asking that question for a few weeks now, and I'm starting to lean towards the no, if I'm being honest.
Well, I mean, you see that points combination from, the likes of Ait Nouri getting 15 points. If a defender or like a fullback is getting goals and assists and a clean sheet, the points stack up. So Liverpool defenders have lost that, and then if they're not getting plenty of assists and goals, then suddenly you've got the likes of Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold that are suddenly becoming 2-point a game week players.
Yeah, and every single Premier League team has a striker capable of scoring against Liverpool, except for maybe Burnley, maybe West Brom.
Yeah.
So if you're holding on to those assets just for those fixtures, you're going to be kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit. Salah got his goal, obviously. Again, we talked about set and forget captain Salah. You would have got 16 points if you did that.
Yeah.
And Jota again stepped up and got himself another goal. So Jota's actually a really big pickup for Liverpool. He's playing really well.
Who's next?
Aston Villa Southampton. It was for me the game of the week as
7 goals?
Unbiased, impartial observer. 7 goals.
Yeah.
I had Grealish on my team, and he stepped up again, got a goal, a couple of assists. Tyrone Mings, I've talked about in the last couple of game weeks as a defender on my radar.
Yep.
He stepped up, got a goal. He also didn't jump up during one of Ward-Prowse's dead balls. Obviously, Ward-Prowse scored 2 goals in the first half from set pieces, and one of those balls went straight over Mings' head, just grazed his scalp. He was the only player in that wall that didn't leap, but he's got himself a goal, so he made up for it. Danny Ings scored again, but he's buggered his knee.
Yeah, that's a shame. Che Adams with the assist.
Yeah, Che Adams was a differential we talked about as well last week.
Walker Peters, on my team, I had him on the bench, and it looks like I didn't really miss out on too much.
No, I had him on the bench as well. But Ward-Prowse, he's probably just put himself on a lot of players' radars.
I had him earlier in the season. I'm fond of him as a player. He's not necessarily always the most attacking, but I mean, wow, what a game week.
I think already this week, since the game week's ended, 144,000 new owners of Ward-Prowse, and it's hard to look away from that, but he's been at
good price points.
Yeah, Southampton for a long time. He's consistently playing. He's their captain, so around that price point, he's actually a pretty good option.
Absolutely. Next game, Newcastle versus Everton.
Yeah, this was a bit of a kind of a... We knew what was going to kind of happen in this game. One of the teams was going to win 2-1. We didn't quite know which team it was going to be.
That's true.
And we knew if the goals were going to come, they were going to come from either Callum Wilson or Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and both of those things happened. The biggest question mark leading into the game was whether or not Rodriguez was going to play. they answered that question on Friday night when Ancelotti just flat out said, no, he's not going to be on the team sheet this week.
Yeah, Callum Wilson was my kind of dark horse pick last week. I'm no Nostradamus. I think it's quite clear to see it's Callum Wilson scoring the goals for Newcastle.
Yeah, I mean, Alan St. Maximin is still a player that we like to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
He had a couple of shots in that game. But Callum Wilson, especially at that price point, $6.5 million, is a really, really great third choice striker for anyone, thinking about maybe trying to save a little bit of money at the front end of your squad. The next game,
Yep.
my guys.
Hang on, rewind a little bit. What was your comment last week about this game? Your prediction?
I predicted a Rashford hat-trick.
Yeah. How'd that pan out?
I was close.
In what sense?
Rashford played the game.
Oh, he played football
he was
on
the
that
field,
day.
yeah. Arsenal obviously beat Man United 1-0 at Old Trafford for the first time in 14 years. They won there. Aubameyang, for those managers that have held on to Aubameyang for this length of time, he's their captain, so he's always going to be playing. He's usually their main source of goals. He hasn't actually done a lot this year. Finally stepped up to take a penalty that Bellerin won for them. And Bellerin, again, another one of the players who...
performing quite consistently.
Yeah, $5 million is his cost. He's got an assist, got another clean sheet here as well. My only concern with Bellerin, and I will talk about this a little bit later with respect to what I might be doing with my transfers, he's a fiery Italian. And with that comes yellow cards. He's already at 3 this season. We know that if they get 5 yellow cards, it's an automatic suspension. So
he might be a fiery Italian, but I think he's actually more so a watery Spaniard.
He's obviously Spanish, that's right, yeah.
He is, yeah. But, they're all the same, right? Isn't that what you said about Liverpool and Everton players the other week?
Yeah.
It's all the same? It's all the same, Bellerin, mate. Don't worry about it. He's actually developed a rather nice Cockney accent over the last 10
years. Don't they speak Spanish in Italy anyway?
Stop.
Spurs Brighton 2-1.
Yeah.
Who didn't show up to the game this week? I think it was Son. And a lot of people, we talked about this last week, were tossing up between Son or Kane for captain, and those that picked Son, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Walk away from this game week and maybe slap the armband on Kane next week.
Dust yourself off.
But Harry Kane got a goal, and
Gareth Bale.
And you talked about Reguilon.
Yeah, I liked him, and then I was a bit like, last week he didn't start. Davies started ahead of him. This week Mourinho puts him back in, and he gets an assist. I really like him. I'm going to definitely keep an eye on him at left back. It's a shame that Son didn't perform. Kane's kind of... I see some parity a little bit with DCL, who's obviously not been doing this at this level for as long, but DCL just, for Everton, snatching a goal each or most weeks. Kane kind of doing the same there. I mean, for him, it's a penalty, right?
Yeah. Well, he's a penalty taker, which is automatically this season add them to your team.
It's important, right? Unless it's Jorginho.
The other news on the other side of the pitch for Brighton, Tariq Lamptey, a lot of people looked at him at the start of the season. He was really, really high performing, very attacking. He got 3 assists in the first 3 game weeks. Hasn't done a lot since then. Finally got himself a goal.
Good for him.
Yeah.
But in more bizarre news, Mailbag wasn't even in the matchday squad. I looked around the time to find out why. Didn't get too far. Have since found out via the internet rumour machine that it had apparently come out of the Brighton camp that the manager decided it was a tactical decision. It's an interesting one that he didn't even make the bench, so I don't want to cast any aspersions, but alarm bells ringing for me. I don't know what's going on there, but to not even put your star striker who's fully fit in your matchday squad, bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, keep an eye on that one, obviously, if you own him. Maybe just see what happens next week. A lot of players are doing the same thing with Sice as well. So, Fulham, West Bromwich Albion. Last week we said yawn. Game actually delivered, and a lot of people that were holding on to Mitrovic were finally rewarded. Not with a goal though.
2 assists.
Yeah, 2 assists, not too bad, and they were good assists too.
They were. Yeah.
The first one I think was a header.
Yeah.
It didn't look like he was trying to direct it at goal, and if he wasn't, it was a perfect header back to one of his teammates.
Straight across the goal mouth.
Yeah.
Good for him. Fulham player I've talked about, and he's still on my watch list, Lookman. Yeah, not much happened. But yeah, Mitrovic has 2 assists. Yeah, if you've got Mitrovic, you'll be pretty pleased with that. One
of the other performers in that game, I don't want to harp on about it too much because I'm never going to bring in a Fulham defensive asset, is Aina, who scored a goal, clean sheet, 3 bonus points, so another 15 points.
Well, if that was going to happen, it was going to be at home against West Brom.
Yeah, that's true. And we talked about that with Liverpool. That's going to be one of the only opportunities they're going to get a clean sheet this season.
Last game of the game week 7.
Do you want to start this one off?
Yeah, I guess I better as the resident Leeds fan. Leeds versus Leicester. So, in fairness, and I won't dwell too much on this, well done Brendan Rodgers and Leicester. It's a good game plan. 8-9 guys behind the ball, playing off the counter with Vardy, and Vardy looked phenomenal.
Yeah, Vardy played really, really well with 2 assists and a goal. I know you had Stuart Dallas on your team, and he got himself a goal too.
He did, yeah.
Didn't get any clean sheet points. Obviously, they conceded 4, but Tielemans with a couple of goals.
Yeah.
I know Under, he came on as a late substitution, got himself an assist.
Yeah, he looked dangerous.
And Maddison as well was a substitute with an assist.
Maddison looked good when he came on as well. Harvey Barnes' link-up play with Vardy was really good, and Barnes was one of those guys where some people had started to lose faith because his form dipped and he wasn't scoring too highly, and then he comes and has a game like this.
And a player that you talked about a little bit in the past as well, Jack Harrison. He's played almost every single minute of football so far for Leeds. He only missed 1 game against Man City, obviously his parent club, so he couldn't play against them. He popped up with a bonus goal and bonus point,
Yeah.
And he actually played really well. So
he has played consistently. We'll get to this towards when we start at the end of the show to talk about what we're going to do next week, because I'm going to mention Harrison. So stay tuned for that.
Yep, and we're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll jump into our own performances.
Cool. See you in a sec. Welcome back to Bench Boost, boys. We're back from the break. And now we're going to talk about our game week performance, and I would like you to go first, Scott.
I'm happy to go first because I did really well.
How well?
Absolutely smashed it this week, 70 points, so 27 points above the average. I've obviously got a few things to keep an eye on with my team, even though I did really well. There were still some players that, we talked about this a little bit earlier, didn't actually play in the game, but I got really lucky with my substitutes coming off the bench. So Sice, I started, didn't play. Kilman came on for him with 6 points. James Rodriguez, I took the gamble on Friday night that he would play. He didn't play, so I ended up getting points off the bench from Ollie Watkins, who slotted in as my third striker.
Just to interject very quickly, though, to give yourself some credit, you didn't get lucky with your subs. That was a tactical decision.
No, I did. I placed my subs exactly where I wanted them to be, and I knew that if
it was insurance.
If Rodriguez didn't play, I definitely didn't want Kilman being the one to slot in for him, so I had Ollie Watkins as my number 1 sub, and Kilman was always going to be my backup for a defender, because I only play 3 defenders at the back, generally. And I'm going to stick with that trend next week, but we'll get to that a little bit later. My highest performer was Grealish. I captained Kane, who got 6 points for 12. Ollie Watkins came off the bench for 7, like I said, and DCL got 8 points again, as well as Salah. My underperformers this week, Jorginho crept on with 4 minutes to go.
Yeah.
If he didn't play, I would have got all of the 1 points from Kyle Walker-Peters, so it really didn't end up biting me in the bum, but again, something to look at. Son obviously didn't show up to play, and Robertson at the back again. Liverpool can't keep clean sheets at the moment. McCarthy in goals. Southampton, obviously they conceded 3 goals against Villa. McCarthy, he's for me a set and forget kind of keeper. I'm not really ever going to look at my keeper position and think I want to do anything with that, apart from my backup goalkeeper, who is Fraser Forster. I'm never going to play my bench boost until I have a goalkeeper that actually does feature.
It needs to happen at some point this season, mate. The podcast's named after it.
Exactly. And I also I don't have any money in the bank just yet, so I'll talk a little bit later about my transfers and how I'm going to be getting some money in the bank. But how did you go? Not
quite as well as you, but still pretty good. I got 63 points, which I'm always happy if I get higher than the game week average, which was 53 points. To go for the negative straight away.
That means I was only 17 points above the average. God, my maths is terrible.
I wouldn't have even have questioned it, so thank you for your honesty, Scott.
I'm a big maths fan.
I'll start with the negatives. McGinn at Villa, Son, I don't know if you've heard of him, Robertson or Jorginho, I mean, this should be in speech quotations. Let me down. They underperformed.
So we had three of the same players that didn't perform well.
Yeah, yep. McGinn's my other one. He's on back-to-back 2-point weeks now. That seems to have coincided quite awfully with Aston Villa's slight dip in results, I'd say. They still scored goals. Yeah. So it was unusual, actually, for Villa to get 3 goals and McGinn not to get the assist. But there we go. I also captained Kane. I was going to captain Son, but I looked at it and I don't know, I just had a kind of gut feeling that Kane was the one, and that did pay off. Ironically, I would have got more points slightly if I had have captained Salah, but I'm not too upset. Bench didn't perform at all, which is fine. Sometimes I actually like it when the bench don't perform because it makes me feel like my first 11 selection is vindicated. As for biggest performers, Leno, clean sheet for Arsenal, I got 7 points. Stuart Dallas, 6 points. Grealish, 15. Kane, 12. Calvert-Lewin, 8. And that's about the size of it. So a few misfires, a few guys that got decent points. It's one of those game weeks that just takes me enough to get decently above the average, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
Have you got James Rodriguez?
Got rid of him.
Right, I still have James Rodriguez. He's still got a question mark about whether or not he's going to play next week. A couple of other players too now with question marks. Rodrigo Feliz definitely not playing. He's actually in self-isolation because he came in contact with someone with the COVID.
Yeah.
Another player we talked about a little bit earlier, Tarek Lamptey, after he scored his goal for Brighton, ended up coming off. He's only a 75% chance to play in the next game. Still a really attractive offering as a defender because he's only at that 4.7 mark. And again, 75%. We've seen players with less than that come up to play.
Oh yeah, we have.
Sorry, on Gameweek 3. Ings was another one we talked about who, after he scored his goal, he went off. He was back at 50% to play after the game, but I read a report this morning that said that the scans were looking pretty good.
So we've talked about this before, but this is also another good reason why you shouldn't rush necessarily to make your transfers unless you're extremely confident. Wait until Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, and we know that this season with Europe as well, European games being played a little bit sooner as well, it's a very packed season, it's a very tight season, so players are going to be getting more ambiguous muscle injuries.
I believe so.
And one of the questions we'll have in the mailbag later on will actually touch on muscle injuries and reoccurring muscle injuries for a specific player, but it's something that you've got to keep an eye on for all players.
Definitely.
Players to watch and transfer. Any players into your watch list this week, Gav?
I don't know if there's much in the way of new additions, but more still tightly watching. Callum Wilson. To be honest, I'd gladly have him in my team, but when you've already played your wild card and you're in that position where you don't willfully want to make 3 transfers in a game we can lose 8 points. So he's just always there bubbling under, and if that's the right decision one week based on an injury or maybe fixture difficulty, Wilson would walk into my team. I am slightly concerned about Jorginho not starting. That gives me the fear when that happens, but not necessarily in a rush to get rid of him, but we will talk about that later on. Other ones to watch, again, sorry for the negative angle, but Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold, the clock's ticking. Keeping an eye. Obviously I have Robertson in my team. I don't know how long that will last for because they're not cheap players in defence. And as for Gareth Bale, I thought he was worth a mention. He is an expensive price point. I personally will not be interested in Bale until he's regularly starting games and regularly scoring points. I know it's kind of a bit of a throwaway comment, but he's just not worth a gamble for me.
No. Well, and he's even more expensive than Son, even still. One of the players that I obviously saw, I watched the whole game, was the Wolves game, was Ait-Nouri. He's not owned by many players. It was one of his first games for Wolves, might have even been his first game. To put in a performance like that, you got to question whether or not he's put himself on the manager's radar and he's going to keep getting games. So I just want to keep an eye on him. Milivojevic for Crystal Palace went off with a red card. So depending on the length of and severity of that ban, if you've got him, get him out. But he's the penalty taker generally when he plays.
Sure.
So that's one that you've got to keep an eye on red cards. You've got to keep an eye on injuries and things like that. The other one, Seiss didn't play. You touched on this. There was always that chance going into the game week. I'm going to keep an eye on Sice because there are a lot of players competing for that spot. Kilman, Marcel is injured at the moment. Aitnori, again, he actually is playing as a left winger. So
yeah, Nuno's got almost a nice problem there.
Really nice headache. Same sort of headache as Lampard with Chelsea's midfield. Yeah, and I think for me, if you're looking at the Wolves' defence, Cody is probably really the only player that is consistently playing every game. Of course, he's their captain, but he's more valued for the clean sheets and the performances he's putting on defensively than he is as an attacking asset for Wolves. So
yeah, probably a good reminder as well, and it's very easy for me to say because often I'll say this and then I'll go make rash changes, but I would say try and have a bit of patience before you write someone off because they didn't have a good game, but just do what you want.
Yeah. Alright, we're going to take another break just now, and we're going to come back with next week's fixtures and some questions from the mailbag.
See you in a minute. Welcome back to Bench Boost Boys with me, Gav, and the lovely Scott. We're on the final stretch, and before we kick in with the forecast for upcoming Game Week 8, a little reminder, you can join the Bench Boost Boys private league on FPL. The code is P2IFBX. P2IFBX. Please join us. We need friends. Scott, would you like to kick us off with the Game Week 5 forecast?
I would. It's going to be a really good week of fixtures. There's some really big games coming up. Everton Man United is one that stands out. Leicester Wolves, Man City Liverpool, and Arsenal Aston Villa. But we'll start with Brighton Hove Albion and Burnley. A not so exciting fixture, if I'm being brutally honest.
Especially if Mope's not involved. What's going on?
Is he going to play?
Well, we touched on this earlier. I mean, you know what? This will put it to the test. This will show us. Was it some kind of tactical decision, or is he done?
Because, I mean, Burnley did a really good job of shutting out Tottenham a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Last weekend, they conceded 3 goals against Chelsea. I think Mailbag is Brighton's best asset to go against that really stoic and quite difficult to break down Burnley defence. So it's going to be really interesting to see whether or not he does play and whether or not Lampy's going to be fit again.
It's got 0-0 written all over it, mate.
Yeah.
Next.
I mean, if Mailbag doesn't play, I'd almost bet a 0-0. I mean, Chris Wood's a good striker. I don't know if he's going to be good enough to break down.
Sure, there's Trossard as well, but
defense.
I don't know. My prediction is 0-0. Next.
We'll touch on that one next week. Southampton Newcastle, actually another really good game to watch because Southampton scored a lot of goals last weekend, and Newcastle.
It did alright, you know.
A couple of goals as well. Callum Wilson got his head down, got himself another couple of goals. This one could go either way.
My little comment on this one is, and I've actually mentioned this a couple of times now, so sorry if I'm boring the shit out of you, but anyone with a death wish and a bit of a gambler might want to chuck Darlow from Newcastle in goal. He's 5 mil, so there's obviously cheaper keeps out there, but he certainly gets involved with the saves. Yeah,
and we know a lot of people have already transferred in Ward Prowse after his performance last weekend, so if he has any set pieces, they're going to be watching pretty eagerly.
Ward-Prowse's dead balls.
And we'll see if Danny Ings plays. He's only 50%. He's still 50% even after the results of those scans. So
I think there's goals in this game, though.
Yeah, and Shea Adams again is another differential choice for Southampton owners who could
absolutely
potentially get a goal.
Everton, Manchester United. Oh, tricky one. I feel like Solskjaer's on a bit of a sticky wicket, isn't he? Rodriguez to return? We'll see.
Yeah, Dominic Calvert-Lewin is still scoring goals, so he's obviously going to be someone that's going to torment that Man United defence. It'll be a really interesting aerial battle, I think, between him and Harry Maguire.
Yeah, that would be cool.
We know that DCL is capable of scoring with his left foot, his right foot, but he does score a lot of goals with his head.
There was a little bit said about Rashford's body language in the last game. I know he's still relatively young, but he probably fits that profile you were talking about earlier with the consistency issues. It feels a bit make or break, but I fancy Everton for the win and DCL to score.
And Martial should be returning this week, I think.
Right, okay, well let's see if that makes a difference.
Crystal Palace Leeds.
Yeah. Is this Zaha's turn to have a good game?
Yeah, I think it is.
And
I'm not saying Leeds are a terrible team.
No, to be honest though, it's definitely no secret that Leeds are shaky at the back, and I think that's a mixture of, as much as he's club captain and the fans and players love him, Liam Cooper, I don't know if he's quite, it sounds cruel to say, I don't know if he's quite cut out for the Premier League. Robin Koch looks really good, but I think he's still trying to settle, and he feels a little bit shell-shocked because he's been dragged into the Premier League kicking and screaming. Yeah, Zaha, I wouldn't put it past him to score. Obviously, as a Leeds fan, I want them to win.
Crystal Palace actually have quite a few good fixtures coming up, so if you were thinking about getting on the Zaha bandwagon, he's just got his bad game week out of the way. He's got Leeds next, then Burnley away, Newcastle at home, and then West Brom away. So it's actually a pretty good run of fixtures for a player like Zaha. So Crystal Palace might not win all of those games, but if Zaha's going to score, he's going to score against those kind of teams.
There we go. Yeah, Leeds, Jack Harrison's always one to watch. Klitsch as well. And, you know, talking about having their turn to perform, maybe Bamford to get some goals as well, in fairness.
Yeah, Bamford didn't score on the weekend.
No, but he had a couple of, well, to be honest, they were kind of sitters, but that's very Bamford, but yeah.
But he scored a hat-trick the previous game week, so he's got a lot of new owners, and they're probably waiting for him to get some goals against Crystal Palace. Chelsea, Sheffield United, I think this is going to be a really comfortable win for Chelsea.
I kind of feel bad for Sheffield United. And, you know, we're still on Bruce to watch. Obviously, Chelsea's no easy game, but we did say once they get their rung of hard games out of the way, we'll see what Brewster does. But I don't know, either way, to be honest, Sheffield United looking pretty poor.
For me, I think this is probably going to be about Chelsea defensive assets again.
Right.
I've got Chilwell. I like Zuma again. I think it's going to be a really good game for Chelsea's defenders. It's going to be tough to ever make the right decision on a Chelsea midfielder because there's a lot of rotation there. Havertz can play, Ziyech can play, Pulisic when he's fit. We know he's not fit at the moment. We've got Mason Mount as well, Hudson-Odoi.
I feel like the reason Jorginho lost his space is not necessarily because he missed a couple of penalties, but more to kind of adapt the system slightly to accommodate Ziyech, really.
Yeah, and it paid off. So will Jorginho get to play again? That's something to definitely keep an eye on. This is a fixture where, you know, if he doesn't play again,
a lot of people are going to have questions.
Hit the panic button.
Yeah.
West Ham versus Fulham.
Yeah, I saw your notes. You said yawn.
Yeah, look, Fulham haven't been playing inspired football. West Ham are a team that is more than capable of scoring goals, but they're also a team that's more than capable of conceding goals. I don't get excited by any of the players in either of these two teams. I mean, there are a couple of players to look out for, like Fornals, who's scored on the weekend. Have you got Cresswell?
Yeah, I do. He was on my bench at the weekend because I've got a pretty strong defence. But actually, to be honest, this might be a good opportunity for me to bring him in and maybe even roll the dice and bring Robertson out. But yeah, Cresswell, Fornals has been pretty consistent. As we talked about earlier in the show, Lookman didn't do much at the weekend. Maybe he will. He's still on my watch list. Mitrovic as well. I think this game's probably got 1-1 written on it.
Yeah, you know it's panic stations when you're thinking about bringing off a player like Robertson or any Liverpool defensive assets for a West Ham defensive asset.
Well, I don't take that decision lightly, and we'll get to that when we get to the section where we talk about what we're going to do this week. So I will keep my powder dry on that one.
Yeah. Tottenham's visiting West Brom and playing away from home. I would still like to think that it's going to be a pretty comfortable win for Tottenham. I think they'll actually dominate this fixture.
Mainly because we hate West Brom for no reasonable reason.
It's just that they just don't do anything. Do it? They even play when they're playing? But Kane and Son, again, a lot of people are going to be asking the choice, which one am I going to captain? Because this is a really attractive fixture, and if the other choice is always going to be Salah, they're playing against Man City away. So
it's got to be Kane, isn't it?
It's going to be Kane. Yeah, it's going to be Kane for a lot of people. I think it's going to be Kane for me. I think Son had a bit of an off game last game. He doesn't have many of them. So I think he's actually going to play really well.
Sure.
So maybe a late change in the decision for a lot of players, and maybe some will keep the faith.
Out of morbid curiosity, I'm still intrigued about this Bale development. To my knowledge, I don't expect him to start, but I'm going to keep my eye on the game news.
He's a player that doesn't have a whole heap of match fitness, so he's not he's definitely not a guaranteed starter and someone that I would be avoiding like the plague from an FPL perspective. Like you said earlier, until he's playing regularly, until he's scoring regularly.
Oh, also another one to watch as well is to see if Mourinho continues Reguilon above Davies.
Yeah. Next game to watch, another big game, Leicester Wolves. I think this is going to be a really nervous game for a lot of FPL managers.
Right.
A lot of people are relying on Leicester players across the board. A lot of people rely on Jamie Vardy. There's a couple of Leicester midfielders. We talked about Harvey Barnes a little bit earlier that people rely on there. And then Justin's one of the most highly selected defenders in the entire game.
That's right.
I think it's Kasper Schmeichel. You have him.
I had him until I played my wild card a couple of weeks back.
Right. Okay. So there's a lot of people have Leicester assets across the board, and a lot of people also have the same with Wolves because we've talked about Jimenez in the past. We've talked about Podence a couple of weeks ago, and for me and for a lot of players, the Wolves defenders are really, really good quality pickups.
Yep, I mean Vardy's in fine form, so I would expect a goal there. It's one of those ones where we could easily look at this and go, this has got 3 written all over it and it'll be 0-0, so watch this space.
Yeah, we don't like to do many score predictions. I mean, we do, but we can't help
ourselves, but we fuck them up.
Last week I was right when I said the game was either going to have goals or it doesn't.
Oh, wow, that's bold.
You can't be wrong with that statement.
You've blown my mind.
Man City Liverpool, probably the game of the week for punters.
Well, okay, so this is a kind of moot point, but you'd have probably felt a lot differently about this fixture last season, right? When you kind of look at misfiring Liverpool are playing misfiring Man City. As much as there's still 2 fantastic teams with great players.
We say misfiring, but Liverpool's actually winning the Premier League.
I know. It feels like such a strange thing to say. It's a bit like when I wrote off Fernandes the other week, even though he had a pretty strong game week. It's just that kind of looking at it through the elite lens.
But much like our league table, the Premier League table itself is really close. There's only like 1 point between the first 10 teams, I think.
Yeah.
I think the biggest gap is 2 points between a 10-point team and an 8-point team. So this game could go either way, obviously. I think I'm going to avoid the Salah captaincy option. Same.
It seems a little bit risky. And you know what? Hold my hands up. We might be talking next week and going, wow, Salah got 4 goals. But head at the moment says too risky, rather play Kane, to be honest.
Yeah, and the other note that we've talked about was Robertson, Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think even though Man City don't have a lot of options up front, they have enough players throughout the midfield, including De Bruyne. They have Sterling as well, who can create havoc for any defence. So I'm probably going to be looking at my Liverpool asset in that game, Robertson, and making some changes there, but we'll get to that in a minute. Last game of the game week, Arsenal versus Aston Villa. I think Arsenal might be able to lift after that. I mean, it wasn't a big win in terms of goals scored, but it was a huge win for them. For
form-wise, Arsenal are on the up, Villa are on the down. Doesn't always count for everything when the actual kickoff comes, but I would fancy Arsenal to win this maybe, or snatch a win.
Yeah,
it's hard to look past those attacking assets for Villa though, because they're so dangerous.
Yeah, Aubameyang's confidence might be high. I know it was a penalty, but for a striker just to get a goal is always good for confidence. But Villa will also have something to prove after a pretty good second half performance against Southampton. They let the game kind of go in the first half of that game. But like you said, they've got Grealish, they've got Ollie Watkins, they've got some really, really good players. So I think that they could cause some trouble for Arsenal's defence.
Hopefully it'll be a good game.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good game. But yeah, I think we should move on to some questions from the mailbag.
It's the mailbag. Okay, I will kick off then. So Ben of Benji's Ballers asks, Jorginho didn't start for Chelsea on the weekend. Stick with him or look for options which look guaranteed to start and get minutes? So I'd like to give this one a go quick. There's a couple of problems here. One is Jorginho's price point, and we did talk about this a bit at the top of the show. He's so bloody cheap that actually, if you're trying to look for a like for like, if you're trying to replace him with another sort of 5.3 or around there player, your options aren't that great. You've got Podence, I guess, who's not been that consistent. And then we've got the other point we've touched on in the show, which is try and show some patience. So I also have Jorginho, and we'll get to what I'm going to do, but whilst it's tempting to get rid of him, Lampard's chopping and changing a bit, and I would say probably wait. The only other reason maybe to get rid of him in my mind would be if you're making multiple transfers. So for instance, if you wanted to take a 4-point hit and do 2 transfers, you might also sell off a higher value asset to then get someone more expensive in midfield.
Yeah, and I would say this isn't the first time that he's been rested for a game. He was rested, I believe, when they drew 3-3 with the team earlier in the season. I can't remember the team off the top of my head, but he could have just been rested for that last game. He might slot in against Sheffield next week. Keep an eye on it, because if he does, then he might just be part of Lampard's rotational plans.
Yes, and that's what I think, because obviously they've got European football as well, and he's trying to fit in a lot of particularly attacking midfielders, so keep your eye on it. I would say don't do anything too rash.
Yeah, I agree. Keep an eye out for this next game, but if you were going to shore up some cost in your defence, like you just talked about the fact that there aren't a lot of great price points around Jorginho's price in midfield. In defence, however, there are a lot of really good assets at the moment for that 4.5 price point. So if a player is really frustrating you, like a Trent Alexander-Arnold or a Robertson, maybe look to make that change first to bring in some cash to maybe bump Jorginho's to maybe stack your bank a little bit, so you've got about 7.5 million to play with.
Yeah, you've got to be smart with it, but just bear in mind that you might not want to necessarily take lots of point hits.
Yep. Torrin of Tossbags asks, how can we trust Jamie Vardy enough not to miss every third game with this reoccurring injury? I think he's talking about the hip impingement.
Sure.
He is a pure money saver for those of us who can't afford Kane, but too expensive to have in the team if he keeps missing a random game.
I do feel the pain with that one. When you start to see those strikers who are, say, under 10 mil but above, say, 7.5, it's a weird price point to be in, and I know I can appreciate people looking for consistency. Again, stuck record, but don't do anything rash. Like I would say as well, look at how many points per game he's getting for you. Look at how many, if you want to, I know you're a fan of a spreadsheet, Scott, but look at points per million, and then look at who's around him at similar price points, and how you could make that maneuver, and if the asset you're bringing in would actually replace him for value. And it makes me nervous when players miss games or don't play more than, say, 70 minutes, but you've got to kind of weigh it up.
I think you've also got to look at the Fantasy Premier League as a marathon and not a sprint. Yeah. So we've mentioned this before with Salah, the set and forget captain. If you pop the captain's armband on Salah, this entire FPL game so far, you would have got 116 points for Salah. Vardy's not far behind that. He'd be on 110. He's scored 55 points overall. So even if he misses a game week, like you said, it's points per game as an average. Mm-hmm. So he might not play every single game, but when he plays, he's going to do things. He's going to be Leicester's most dangerous player, and we all know what he's capable of. He did it last season. He obviously had a cracking season, 2017-2018. But Jamie Vardy is one person that, he might not play every game. He might have muscle injuries, and this season more than ever. But when he plays, he's going to score points.
Yeah, totally. So just understand that the value is considered by more than one factor. Okay, last question on the mailbag this week. Ian of the Delivery Men. In reference to your criteria for captain selection, do you follow your gut instinct, or do you focus on fixtures/form? I know some players focus on spreadsheets. I wonder who he could be talking about. But do those statistics dictate your final choice for captain? What do you reckon?
That's a really good question. For me, there's a couple of things. Firstly, I do look at form, but I absolutely focus on fixture. So we just talked about the fact that Salah is playing against Man City. That to me is a red flag. Yep. I don't want, as far as fixture difficulty rating goes, for each of those two teams, you'd be looking at a really difficult fixture. So for me, I would avoid putting it. I also do try and focus on putting the armband on a player that's playing at home where possible. I can't do that this week because I'm captaining a Spurs player and they are playing away to West Brom. But playing away to West Brom, you might as well be playing at home anyway.
Sure, you got to weigh it up.
So for me, it's certainly about form. It's certainly about fixture. It's not really gut.
No.
But if I'm looking at something like, do I decide between Son and do I decide between Kane? I generally just, in that instance, it might be a little bit gut feeling.
Yeah.
I do think Son is due for a good game, but on Kane's performances and his consistency, I'm just not willing to take the risk at the moment.
No, that's actually a really good point. And in fairness, that is the moment I too use gut. I looked at Son and Kane, and my gut did just say Kane. So you're quite right. That's exactly when I do use gut. But otherwise, I'm exactly the same as you. I'm looking at form. I'm looking at fixture difficulty. Are they playing at home? Who are they playing against? It's a pretty straight up analytical decision. And as you say, it's another good reason why Salah, and hopefully this won't come back to bite us, but Salah not to be captain this weekend.
Yeah, we will eat our words next weekend if we have to.
Ooh, yummy.
I will say one quick thing before we move on to the next section, and that is that historically, if you look at the data, captaining a player that plays at home is traditionally a little bit more safer than captaining a player that's playing away.
I wonder how much I know people talk about this a lot, but the lack of
home fans is going to affect that this season. Yeah, we could see something different this year, obviously.
We shall see. Okay, so we are moving on to the final section of the podcast, which is what will we do this week? Scott, what are you going to do, mate?
I've already kind of set in place my plans for this week. I think I'm going to play 3 across the front, unlike last week where I played 2 across the front, which ended up being 3 across the front because of the substitutions. But I'm actually doing a total switch across the back. The only player that's keeping their spot is Chilwell. I'm going to bring Walker-Peters on in Kilman because Sice, again, I'm not 100% sure he's going to play. I might make a decision later on in the week and put Sice in for Kilman, but Kilman did well. So I don't know that I'm going to regret that later. I like Southampton against Newcastle. Even though I'm a fan of Callum Wilson, I think that Southampton have a chance of keeping a clean sheet. So I'm going to roll the dice on Walker-Peters maybe getting a clean sheet. I am going to gamble on Jorginho playing. So I am going to have Rodriguez on the bench, only because they're playing against Man United and it's a tough fixture for Everton. But I think taking the gamble on Jorginho, when they're playing at home to Sheffield, if Jorginho does play, it's going to be, it's going to be almost guaranteed clean sheets, which is not a lot of points for a midfielder, but he does take their pens again. So I think Jorginho will have a really good opportunity to push forward. I've got Son, Salah in my midfield. I'm not going to captain either of those guys. I'm going to play Grealish against Arsenal because I think Grealish and Watkins, who I am going to play up the front as well, have a chance of playing really well against Arsenal. I'm going to run Calvert-Lewin up the front against Man United. I think he's actually going to play. And I'm going to captain Kane. So the biggest note for me is that Robertson is sitting on my bench. Now,
bold.
I haven't made a decision on this yet. If I am going to make a transfer this week, any injuries notwithstanding or any wild news coming out, I think I'm going to look at selling Robertson.
There we go. Any ideas who might come in?
Well, there's 2 players I've kind of got my eye on. I know Tariq Lamptey's carrying an injury right now, but at 4.7 million, that's...
Are you freeing up funds? Is this
It's a freeing up funds thing, but it would be with either of the 2 players. And we talked about this earlier. There's a lot of really good options out there for the 4.5 to 5 million price range. The other one is Hector Bellerin.
Yes, I really like the look of Bellerin, actually.
Yeah, he's my favourite Italian Spaniard. What are you going to do?
So, you know what? Maybe nothing, which is not very exciting. Jorginho is the one question mark, and we talked earlier about what to do. Ben asked the question about what to do with Jorginho. So the reason why I gave such a detailed answer is because I've been thinking about this. Names around that price point to bring in: Jack Harrison at Leeds, maybe a gamble on Neto at Wolves. He's doing pretty good. Problem is, I don't know if bringing in either of those will actually be much of an improvement on Jorginho, especially if suddenly he's playing and taking penalties again, and then I feel like a bit of a fool. So that's why I might be leaning towards nothing. As from a point of who I'm going to play, still some question marks, but I may just keep it as it is. I played a 3-5-2 last weekend because Mailbag was my third striker. So obviously now I've got the absolute fear about what the fuck's going on with Mailbag. I'm hoping that some game news will come out before the deadline for this week's Gameweek team selection, and I can make a decision there. I've got Creswell as well on the bench at the moment, and Walker-Peters. May keep Conser in defence. I've got Robertson at Dallas. Yeah, you got me thinking now about Robertson. I don't want to do anything rash like make 3 transfers.
Yeah. taking the 4-point hit for a transfer is always a bit risky. You did talk about Neto as a possible replacement for Jorginho. Jorginho's obviously scored a lot of points. Neto, though, to his credit, has scored 30 points, but he has played most of every single game for Wolves so far. He does get substituted quite a bit, but it looks like he was building up to match fitness.
Yeah, I feel like he's a roll of the dice. He's a let's just see if this pays off. It depends how bold I'm feeling. The same with Robertson. I could quite easily stick Robertson on the bench and bring in Walker Peters or Creswell. Not sure, but otherwise across the midfield, I feel like I'm going to stick with McGinn for a bit. I feel like he deserves another game week or two. Yeah, he's had 2 back-to-back 2 pointers. But he has done really well this season, and I'm going to stick with him.
Arsenal's a tough fixture though, for Aston Villa. I like to think that as an Arsenal fan.
Of course. I don't know if I'll play him, but I think I'm going to stick with him. This could well be one of those typical Gav game weeks where I go, I'm not going to make any transfers, I'm going to bank, and then it turns out I make 2. So I can tell you all about that next week. But sorry, nothing too exciting from me at the moment.
No chips?
No. I'm sure you could probably play some psychological warfare with me and convince me to.
If we talked about this last week, if we could have convinced Foxy to triple captain Vardy, he would not have regretted that.
That would have been quite good.
Because Vardy scored 14 points, so, that's 42 points.
That's all right.
That's really good for a triple captain score. So I think the only other player that could have potentially done better for him would have been Grealish if he had him.
Sure. It hadn't even crossed my mind to triple captain anyone this week. I suppose, I am playing Kane as my captain, so if I'm feeling bold, I could roll the dice. Maybe I will.
Ooh.
Maybe I will.
Ooh, it's West Brom. I might wait till Spurs are playing West Brom at home and they're still in good form.
Well, listener, this time next week, I'll either be crying tears of joy or sadness.
All right. Do you want to remind them of the socials before we let them go?
Yeah. Bench Boost Boys. We're on Twitter, Instagram, all those lovely places. The website is benchboostboys.club. Remember to join our fantasy football league, which is P2IFBX. Send us some tweets. Talk to Scott. He mans the Twitter most of the time. He needs friends.
It's crickets.
And
there's just crickets on Twitter at the moment.
And you can send us questions for the mailbag, which we'll enjoy answering and pretending we're super knowledgeable.
And I tweeted this out yesterday. The best thing about having a brand new podcast is that we are almost guaranteed to answer your questions. At this point, they probably don't even have to be about FPL.
We're not desperate. You're desperate.
Just life advice.
Okay. Catch you all next week.
See you next week.
See ya.